So I'd like to welcome everybody today to the Bankers Leadership Series that we're holding, and this is actually the second of three roundtables that we're doing with Citigroup, and the first was on cash management. This one's actually on security services, and the next one will be on emerging markets. It seems to me it's a very apposite time to be looking at these kinds of issues. We've had the impact of MiFID, and we're still sort of picking ourselves up and working ourselves out where we are with the impact of that sort of thoroughgoing regulation. And the idea today will be to broadly look at the impact of MiFID, some of the issues arising out of that, for example, the emergence of new platforms. We've got representatives of two or three new platforms here today. We'll be looking at the issue of dark liquidity, of course. We're going to be looking at whether MiFID's really realising its ideals in terms of transparency and accurate price formation. And then we're going to drill down, and we're going into the whole sort of clearing and settlement areas and seeing whether we're starting to see efficiencies there. And I think we'll finish up probably by having a look at the impact of the credit crisis on the markets and the whole securities space. So perhaps if I could first of all just ask everybody around the table to introduce themselves, and then we'll dive into our first topic. So from my left.
I'm Eli Letterman, the Chief Executive of Turquoise, Pan-European multilateral trading facility that will begin trading a week from tomorrow, August 15th, and ramp up over a 3-week period into September.
I'm Alberto Pravettoni, responsible for Group Corporate Strategy at LCH Clearnet Group.
My name is John Lowry. I am the European Head of Electronic Trading Services at Lehman Brothers.
I'm Tom Isaac, and I'm responsible for relationships with banks, brokers and financial infrastructures within Citibank.
I'm Diana Chan, Chief Executive Officer of EuroCCP.
I'm David Shrimpton on the London Stock Exchange's Exec Committee, looking after development of the exchange's equity market business.
I'm Hiranda Misra. I'm the Chief Operating Officer for Chi-X Europe.
Okay, well, let's dive in on the sort of central theme, I think, of what we want to tackle today. I mean, the bank has just come up with a cover story on, we've called it MiFID's Dark Markets, and the subtitle was How Regulation Can Go Wrong. And in it, we've started to look at a lot of the issues arising from MiFID, and it doesn't seem to us as journalists that it's actually created the highly transparent single market that we all hoped it would. And we quoted Richard Balakis, who's the President and CEO of Internet Europe, as saying the market didn't really get its act together for Europe. So I'd be interested in your take on that. And perhaps I could start with John Lowry, as coming from an investment bank. Has that been your experience so far, that the market hasn't really got its act together, or is it the regulation was badly put together, or are we just at the early stages at the moment?
I think it depends on how you define the question. And if you define the question is that we're looking for a single unified marketplace platform, I think that's not a goal that MiFID was about. So MiFID was about transparency. It was about leveling the playing field. It was about passporting and those types of things. I think if you look at MiFID from the point of view of what the regulators were trying to do, I think it's been a very big success. I think the market has started to transform itself. We've got competition in the market. We have new marketplaces that are very, very viable and showing a real value proposition. If it's extended down and into the post-trade clearing space, which wasn't intended to, but we've got competition starting in that space. So from our point of view, we think MiFID has been a very, very successful venture in a very difficult environment to regulate in.
Hiranda Misra, I mean, you're from a platform that couldn't exist really without MiFID. So from your point of view, it is a success in that sense. But have there been teething troubles that have hit your operations?
Yeah, I mean, we actually launched before MiFID on the 30th of March 2007, but yeah, I mean, you're right in saying MiFID as a regulatory driver was the key to change, because it focused minds on the task at hand and subsequently removed some of those concentration rules that we all know and were familiar with that existed across the marketplace. MiFID as an enabler, if you wish, allowed some of those new entrants potentially to come in with a commercially viable business model and challenge the existing exchanges who are dominant in their particular markets. So it's been good for the market as a whole. I mean, in our view, we're only just at the start. It's opening out. Other new entrants are coming in. The market's evolving. There's news that Credit Suisse, Internet Link, no dark pools as well. There's more happening in both the visible and dark space as well. Potentially there'll be more competition initially. Will there be consolidation? Will we follow the US? It's an open question.
David Shrimpton, I mean, you're from the London Stock Exchange, and obviously that's the established player, the kind of participant that the new emerging markets, the new emerging platforms are going to target. I mean, how are you responding?
I think just to put our perspective on MiFID, because I think that gives us, as a market, a lot of opportunities. I think I'd echo what John said, which is it's the start of a process. So we didn't go down the route of the states to prescribe heavy regulation and legislation. It was a relatively open framework for the markets to provide competitive solutions. So it's a relaxed way to open up the markets, I think, is how we read it. And it's taking its time for some of those national barriers to come down. So the pan-European offerings that are coming from the MTFs and the new venues are putting pressure on some of those national boundaries and creating market growth opportunities. And I think as the MTFs and the new entrants offer pan-European offerings, that's what the traditional exchanges will do and compete not only for client base but on tariff and on scope of security coverage.
But one of the things that we reported in our article was that the brokers weren't connected up to the new players yet. I mean, Tom Isaac, is that a reluctance to do it, or?
Well, I think it's early stages. I think the big players are getting connected. Some of the platforms aren't up and running. I think the next level down, there's some interesting ways that the LSE is trying to bring the next tier, their traditional clients, into some of the innovations. I think we see other platforms also opening out. I think providers have got to try and make it as easy as possible so that both the execution and the back-end capabilities are simple and very quick to connect up, so they can really get the new benefit of best execution through some of these platforms. So I think it's early days, and I think it's a massive driver in the whole market, front to back.
But apparently the EU didn't provide us with a proper definition of best execution. I don't know whether, perhaps, Ellie Lederman, whether you would like to comment on that. Is that proving a problem?
Well, best execution it's a complex topic, and I think that they were right not to be prescriptive in that regard. I think it's too simple to look at an order book structure and say that best execution is measured by any individual fill. I think as the dark pools materialize and become competitive and really value-adding facilities, you'll see a completely different order of magnitude in terms of best execution relative to what happens in a transparent market today for very small orders that are going off at very high frequency.
John, do you want to comment on that?
I think you hit the nail on the head. The fact that the rules are not prescriptive, I think, is a tremendous benefit to growth in Europe. We've seen what Reg NMS has done in the U.S. and what a drag it's been, and a costly drag on price formation. And in Europe, we don't have those kinds of issues. And we've allowed the competitive framework to be there. Brokers, if they don't measure up, exchanges, if they don't measure up, are not going to be used in this environment.
But one of our comments also in our article was a lack of preparation on behalf of many of the participants. Diana Chan from EuroCCP, I mean, is that your view of that people are not really ready?
I think you need to have time for people to get ready. Given that we are in 2008, MiFID came about at the end of 2007, I think we need to give more time for the market, because everything now requires technology investments, and there are many different demands on the same resources. I believe that people will put their resources into whatever for them, for their business, makes the most sense. So different business models are going to have different priorities.
As I listen to people talk about MiFID, I think there was a preponderance of opinion that it's very early days, and it is early days. But there's been a tremendous amount of progress made, I think, by any objective measure in 10 months or so. And if you think of it really as a sea change in the really central functions of capital markets and the central facilities of capital markets, I think it's incredibly impressive. There's a lot still to be done, but it's not as if it's just begun.
All right, now your Turquoise is due to the platform you're heading up is due to launch on August the 15th, and it's owned by a consortium of investment banks. But why is it? I mean, you've had one or two sort of false starts. So why has it taken so long to roll it out?
Well,
has there been
first of all, it's not
problem
launching on August 15th. It's going live on August 15th,
Yeah.
and over a period of time, we'll develop the market and add countries and shares. And the launch will be in September. But I think it's the sort of thing that it was started as a consortium. It was a project. I think it's fair to call that. And as these banks and brokers have many competing requirements for technology resources and legal and operational and other people in the organization, Turquoise began as something that people were seconded to from the banks, and then very significantly in September last year, the organization was reconstituted as an independent company. We have gone into execution mode, and I think we're all very, very pleased with what we've done in a relatively short period of time.
John and Larry, Lehman Brothers decided not to go into that consortium. I mean, are you sort of just a little bit wary of what we call the sort of utility models, where the actual participants own the platforms?
Not at all. I think that we understand what our competitors did, and we're going to be there trading on day one, so we have no issues around the need for viability of Turquoise. We made decisions around what we wanted to do, and frankly, some of our other competitors have focused on that. We focused on building our dark pool business. We think that that's a more valuable piece of real estate for Lehman to focus on. We think it answers the client's questions in a more thorough manner, and so we just made a choice to focus on that. But as to Turquoise itself, we made no value judgment about it itself.
Miranda, on Chi-X's website, you say you're going to be 10 times faster and 10 times cheaper than other platforms. I mean, is that a rather?
Not just going to be, we are.
Okay, all right. But then, can you stand up that boast in that case?
Two things. I mean, first, I'd just like to expand upon the market readiness, member readiness part, and we've had live experience of sort of launching out. When we first went live, we had 8 trading participants and we had 3 GCMs on the market. And now, as we stand today, nearly 18 months on, we've got 75 live trading participants and 25 GCMs. So the market's evolved, and that includes a mixture of both, tier 1 banks, tier 2, tier 3 brokerages, the statistical arbitrage players as well that are out there. So it's a real mixture. So I think market appetite is there. It's a little bit chicken and egg in that you need seed liquidity to attract more liquidity as well, and a lot of venues in the past have failed because they failed to achieve that, and then on the back of critical mass you can then obtain more and more volume. And in terms of the value proposition, because we say, going back to your original question, we're cheaper, faster, and we're smarter. On trading tariffs, we are cheaper. I mean, we've carried out the analysis both from the start on the back of a low cost base as well, because it's very much a high volume, low margin game as far as we're concerned. And other exchanges have a lot of fanfare around tariff cuts and things like that. And for example, the LSE have introduced this new tariff. That's great. It's good for the market. Costs fall. It's a benefit of competition, really, the way we see it. Plus, I mean, 2 other things on speed and throughput. Speed will become commoditized, we think. And if you're within the same ballpark, systems will optimize, whether it's proximity hosted systems that we're seeing at 1.4 milliseconds connected into us in terms of the round trip latency. But it's the input, output, and the throughput that we see as essential. Right. Now, our platform has 52,000 messages per second.
Right.
Taking other platforms out there, the LSE is an example. I don't want to keep picking on.
Well, I'm just going to bring the LSE in.
There's 4,200.
So let's give David Shrimpton a chance to answer that. I mean, is Chi-X really 10 times faster than you. You say you can complete a trade in 6 milliseconds. So to be 10 times faster than 6 milliseconds, I can't do that in my head, but it's damn fast, yeah?
Yeah, I'm not sure what the value is in hearing both of our marketing messages on this. So let me just concentrate on one thing. We've got a different client base. We've got a different value proposition. People measure the speed of execution venues, and you've got to hear what the clients say about that. That's the best test. Yeah. In terms of efficiency, Kayak's entry into the market has been innovative, and it has added growth to the market. So as a net benefit to the market, it's a good thing, and it's growing equities across Europe. So I think we're aligned that things are happening in the industry that are adding real value, as opposed to shifting liquidity around and adding connectivity cost. We all have different client bases, we have different tariff structures. There's some alignment with our tariff structure recently to the investment banking commission model, which we think is a positive move. We've also never been able to attract the high frequency stat arb type business model into our market because we haven't had a rebate model. So the seeding that Aranda talked about earlier was important to Kayak's early liquidity. Then it's smarter routing capability, then it's potential proprietary and client flow. So we have that mix within our market. We're putting a new entrant into our marketplace, and we shall see a change in the shape of our business as a result of that. So we all have clients that we understand where their sensitivities are, what drives their models. That's the major shift in our tariff structure that we've just implemented, that goes live on the 1st of September, to play into that new trend of high frequency, new liquidity provision from these specialist market makers that are coming across from the States and are applying that model to the UK and the European markets. So I think it's there's room for many venues. There are different value propositions for each, and I'm sure we'll get into some of those. But it can be complementary if you target your client base and you play to their particular needs. There's best execution that will rule any order flow, yeah, regardless of preference or sentiment or marketing claims or whatever.
Okay.
That's where we see it.
Well, I mean, one of the trends seems to be that the difference now between a platform and a brokerage is almost disappearing because the investment banks themselves are able to internalise their trades. Alberto Prevettoni from LCH ClearNet, is that your kind of view of what's happening?
In terms of internalization of trade, that's probably a little bit removed from what I can see. The point that is important to us as a center counterparty is we see certainly this proliferation of trading venues, which can only be good for us and for the market in general. I mean, I'd like to go back for a second to the point that David was making about these different types of liquidity that are coming to the market. And actually, just yesterday, there was a piece of news that said that the LSE and Euronext were the two exchanges that were actually growing the most this year. Now, this is vis-à-vis the growth that Chi-X is having, and I'm sure that when Eli goes live in turquoise, we'll see also another piece of liquidity. And the question, which I think is really important for the market, is whether this is additional liquidity and additional volumes that can then help all those venues. From our perspective, the experience that we've seen so far is that in fact this is additional liquidity, which ultimately is helping volumes and is helping us and other players in the infrastructure to potentially even further reduce the fees and make therefore the markets more competitive. So that's a kind of dynamic that we are observing, in this space.
But one of the things is, not everybody can grow, can they? I mean, there isn't just business out there for everybody. There is going to be a bit of a fight over it. And one of the things is that the banks are looking to internalise quite a lot of their trades. We've heard figures of as high as 50%. Tom, is that a figure that you would recognise?
I'm not sure I'd recognise 50%. I think the initial Chi-X example has been more volume. I think there is the question, and it'll be great to see as Turquoise goes live and other MTFs go live, how much extra incremental volume will come from and which end clients are doing more, and is it a fragmentation of one order going out to 3 or 4 different MTFs, or is it actually the real value to the end investor is more, or is it stat arb trading more? And I think that's the question that none of us can answer yet until we've got 3 or 4 more venues up and running. And once we get to that stage, I think it'll be very interesting to see, is there enough to sustain all the new platforms, or will it be a typical capital markets type thing where there will be consolidation? My view is, over time, there'll be lots of innovation. We'll identify where the real flows are, where the real value is created, and we probably then move back a little from the number of MTFs that are about to come to market.
Yeah, one thing, and we don't have an investor here, but I mean, the investors are starting to say that they're not clear. I mean, there's more choice of platforms, but actually, it's not them that's really taking the choice. So, I mean, they're giving their trade to a broker, and I mean, we quoted Tony Wally, who's the head of dealing at Scottish Widows, and he said, execution is not just about price; it is about a number of factors, including having a choice of venue. So clearly, he doesn't feel that he has a choice of venue there. And then you've got all the sorts of concerns about, the brokers will try and reverse engineer the trades that are coming in from the investors. John, I mean, would you care to put investors' concerns at rest on some of those issues?
Yeah, I think that there is a bit of conflict in the market here, because clearly, from a client's point of view, it'd be very easy to go to one single place to do everything. But that's not the nature of liquidity, and I think most customers understand that there's different ways, different needs for how each piece of order is handled, and we are in the process of evolving to a marketplace that is going to answer those various needs. The reality is, pre-MiFID, there was very little movement in terms of answering the needs. Now we're in an atmosphere where there's a lot of movement. So the lit space is getting very defined and very competitive. We honestly feel, from our point of view, the next big area of growth is going to be the dark space. We think it has its own value proposition, its own need, its own driver. We could sit here and argue, gee, some of those trades that are done in the dark space will come from the lit space. It really doesn't matter. The reality is that the marketplace itself is going to evolve and sort out the competitive needs to be able to help clients be able to access liquidity and be able to make it easier for people like Tony, for example, to be able to execute his business.